Alright, so let's talk about a name that echoes through history, a name synonymous with power, with empire, with a whole lot of everything, really. I'm talking about Shaka Zulu. Now, Shaka Zulu, born around 1787 and lived until 1828, was one of the most influential leaders in African history. His empire, the Zulu Kingdom, emerged as a dominant force in southern Africa in the early 19th century. Think about that for a second. A dominant force, not by accident but by design, by sheer will, and by some pretty revolutionary ideas. This wasn't just some random guy who got lucky. This was a seismic shift in the power dynamics of an entire region. But here's the thing, and it's a big thing, like an elephant in the room. If the elephant was also a colonial administrator with a very specific agenda. Much of what is popularly known about Shaka is clouded by myth, colonial bias, and sensationalism. You know how it is, history gets written, then rewritten, then turned into a movie with questionable costume choices, and suddenly the truth is buried under layers of, wait, did that actually happen? It's like trying to get the real story of your uncle's fishing trip. The fish gets bigger every year and the details get fuzzier. So what we're going to do today is try to peel back those layers to sift through the noise and get to something a bit more real. It's a journey for sure, because history is rarely simple, especially when it involves figures as monumental and controversial as Shaka. But I think it's important, don't you? To understand the people who shaped our world, not just the legends they became. So buckle up, because here's a more balanced, factual look at the truth about Shaka Zulu's empire. Let's get into it. So, where does a man like Shaka Zulu even come from? Well, it wasn't exactly a fairy tale beginning, more like a Game of Thrones prequel set in southern Africa. Born around 1787, Shaka was the son of the Zulu chief, kaSenzangakhona, and a woman named Nandi. Now, in many stories, being the son of a chief is your golden ticket, right? Not so much for young Shaka. There were, let's call them, complications around his parents' union, and the result was that Shaka and Nandi were not exactly welcomed with open arms by his father's people. In fact, they were rejected, ostracized. Imagine being the kid on the playground nobody wants on their team, but the playground is an entire kingdom. This early rejection, this feeling of being an outsider, you have to imagine that lit a fire under him, a drive to prove everyone wrong and then some. He didn't just sit around feeling sorry for himself, though. Shaka and Nandi eventually found refuge among the Mfecane people, and this is where things start to turn. Under the Mfecane, Shaka came under the wing of their chief, Dingiswayo. Think of Dingiswayo as the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Shaka's, well, Shaka. He became a mentor, someone who saw potential in this intense young man. Shaka learned about statecraft, about military strategy, about how to lead. He wasn't just carrying spears, he was absorbing knowledge, biding his time. Then, around 1817, Dingiswayo died. Suddenly there's a power vacuum, and who's perfectly positioned, highly motivated, and incredibly capable to fill it? You guessed it, Shaka didn't just step up, he consolidated power over the Zulu clan and started bringing neighboring groups into the fold, sometimes through diplomacy, often through warfare. The rejected kid was starting to build his own team. Now, if you're going to build an empire, especially back then, you need a pretty serious army. And Shaka Zulu? He didn't just have a serious army, he revolutionized warfare in the region. It's like he looked at the existing military playbook and said, yeah, this is cute, but I have some notes. And his notes weren't just minor tweaks, they were a complete overhaul. First up, the spear. The traditional Nguni spear was long, designed for throwing. Shaka was like, throwing? That's a bit distant, isn't it? Let's get up close and personal. He introduced the Ikawa, a short, broad-bladed stabbing spear. Think of it as upgrading from a musket to a shotgun for close-quarters combat. It was brutal, effective, and changed the game entirely. You had to be brave, really brave, to use it. But a new spear is just one piece of the puzzle. Shaka was a systems thinker. He developed the bullhorn formation, a disciplined, organized attack strategy. Imagine a central chest of experienced warriors that would pin the enemy, while two younger, faster horns would encircle and crush them from the flanks. It was tactical genius, requiring incredible discipline and coordination. And how did he get that discipline? Through the regimental system, the Amabuto. Young men were conscripted into age-based regiments, living and training together, forging an unbreakable bond and loyalty, not just to their regiment, but to Shaka himself. He also emphasized speed and endurance. His warriors trained barefoot to toughen their feet, covering vast distances quickly. This wasn't just an army, it was a finely tuned, highly mobile, and incredibly lethal fighting machine. So, Shaka's got this incredible military machine, right? What do you do with it? Well, you don't just polish your Ikawas and practice your bullhorn formation for fun. Shaka used his army to unite many clans. Some came willingly, seeing the benefits of alliance and protection. Others, well, let's just say they were persuaded with the pointy end of an Ikawa. Through a combination of conquest and strategic alliances, he forged a large, centralized Zulu state. This was a monumental achievement, bringing together disparate groups under a single banner, a single leader. He was basically playing a high-stakes game of Risk, and he was very good at it. The Zulu kingdom grew rapidly, becoming the dominant power in the region. But this expansion, this rapid consolidation of power, it had consequences. Big ones. Shaka's campaigns caused widespread displacement and conflict across southern Africa. This period in the early 19th century is known as the Mfecane, or Mfecane, depending on the language, a time of chaos, famine, and mass migration. Entire communities were uprooted, new political entities formed out of the remnants of old ones, and the demographic map of southern Africa was redrawn. Now here's where historians get into some pretty heated debates. Some argue that the Mfecane was largely a direct result of Shaka's military expansionism, his total war approach. Others suggest that while Shaka's campaigns were definitely a factor, the scale of the Mfecane might have been exaggerated by later colonial writers. Why? Well, if the land was already in chaos, it makes it a lot easier to justify European land grabs later on. Look, they were all fighting anyway, we're just bringing order. Classic. Chapter 4. How to Run a Kingdom, Shaka's Guide to Governance. Spoiler, it was intense. Alright, so you've built this massive kingdom, now you've got to run it, right? And Shaka's style of governance was, shall we say, direct. He was a powerful, centralizing ruler. There wasn't a lot of, let's form a committee to discuss this. It was more like, this is how it's going to be. He understood power, and he knew how to keep it. Loyalty was paramount, and he cultivated it, especially within his Amabuto. But let's be real, fear was also a pretty big tool in his toolbox. Disobey Shaka? Not recommended. He had a network of spies, an intelligence system that kept him informed about any potential dissent or threats. It was like a pre-internet version of everyone knowing your business. But it wasn't all just iron fist. Shaka was also a pragmatist. He enforced strict discipline, yes, but he also promoted merit. This was actually quite revolutionary for the time. Warriors could rise through the ranks based on their skill, their bravery, their achievements on the battlefield, not just because their dad was someone important. This created opportunities, fostered ambition, and ensured that the most capable individuals were in positions of leadership. Think about that. A society where your talent could genuinely elevate you. Beyond the military and the discipline, Shaka was also instrumental in creating a sense of Zulu national identity. He wasn't just ruling over a collection of conquered peoples, he was forging a nation, a unified Zulu consciousness that would endure long after him. That's Nation Building 101, folks. Even the most powerful reigns eventually come to an end, and Shaka Zulu's was no different. His end, however, was not on a battlefield or from old age. In 1828, Shaka was assassinated. And who were the assassins? Not some foreign enemy, not a rival king. It was his own half-brothers, Dingane and Muslangana, along with an accomplice. Talk about a family feud escalating. It's like something out of a Shakespearean tragedy, but with more assegai. The reasons behind the assassination are complex, as these things always are. Power struggles, jealousy, fear, they all likely played a part. His brothers probably saw him as too powerful, too unpredictable, and perhaps saw an opportunity to seize control for themselves. There are also reports, and this is where it gets a bit murky and sad, that Shaka's mental state had deteriorated, particularly after the death of his mother Nandi in 1827. He was said to be devastated, and his grief reportedly manifested in extreme ways: mass executions, forced mourning, and harsh decrees that alienated many of his own people. Some accounts suggest he banned the planting of crops and the use of milk for a year, which in that society would have been catastrophic. Whether these accounts are entirely accurate or exaggerated by his enemies is debated, but it seems clear that his leadership became increasingly erratic and brutal in his final year. After his death, Dingani, one of the assassins, took over. But the empire Shaka had built with such force and vision began to show cracks. It started to fragment. The strong centralizing hand was gone. Now let's talk about Shaka's image, because hoo-boy did it get a makeover after his death, especially by Europeans. Many 19th century European accounts, traders, missionaries, colonial officials, they painted Shaka as this almost cartoonishly bloodthirsty tyrant. A monster, basically. The narratives were filled with tales of unimaginable cruelty, of rivers running red with blood, of a man who killed for sport. And for a long time, this was the dominant image of Shaka Zulu in the Western world. It was the story that got told, the one that got written down and repeated. It's like they took all the most brutal aspects, real or imagined, and put them under a magnifying glass the size of a small moon. But here's where you gotta put on your critical thinking cap, folks. You have to ask, who was telling these stories and why? These British and Boer accounts were often incredibly biased. Think about it. If you're planning to move in and take over someone's land, it helps your case if you can paint the existing rulers as savage and despotic. Oh, these people are so brutal, they need us to come in and civilize them to bring order. It was a justification, a way to legitimize colonial conquest and the dispossession of African people from their land. Thankfully, modern scholars have started to reevaluate Shaka's legacy, digging deeper than those colonial narratives. They acknowledge he was a brilliant military strategist, an incredible state builder, a genuine innovator. But they also don't shy away from the fact that his methods could be incredibly cruel. It's complex, not black and white. So after all the wars, the empire building, the controversy, what is Shaka Zulu's legacy today? Well, it's massive, and it's still being debated, which tells you how significant he was. In modern South Africa, Shaka Zulu is often revered as a national hero. For many, he's a potent symbol of African unity, of resistance against encroaching forces, and of incredible innovation. Think about it. At a time when the world was changing rapidly, he didn't just react. He reshaped his own part of it. He's seen as a figure who forged a powerful nation from disparate groups, giving them a shared identity and a sense of pride that continues to this day. There are statues, holidays, his name is invoked in political discourse. He's a cultural touchstone. However, that doesn't mean everyone agrees on every aspect of his story. His legacy is, like we've said, complex. Historians and the public alike still grapple with the brutality that was part of his reign. How do you reconcile the brilliant state builder with the ruler who used fear and violence so effectively? It's a conversation that continues. But what's undeniable is that his empire, the Zulu kingdom, laid the foundation for the powerful Zulu Nation. This nation, forged in the crucible of Shaka's leadership, went on to play a crucial and formidable role in resisting colonialism in the later 19th century, most famously in the Anglo-Zulu War. So his impact wasn't just a flash in the pan, it had long-lasting consequences, shaping the history of Southern Africa in ways that are still felt. So, there you have it, a journey through the life, the times, and the empire of Shaka Zulu. As you can see, it's a story that's far richer and more nuanced than the often one-dimensional portrayals we get. Shaka Zulu's legacy is a complex tapestry of innovation, leadership, and controversy. He was a military genius who revolutionized warfare, a state builder who forged a nation, and a ruler whose methods could be undeniably harsh. It's like trying to describe a storm. It's powerful, it's transformative, and it can be incredibly destructive, all at the same time. The man has been called a hero, a tyrant, a visionary, a madman. And maybe, just maybe, there are elements of truth in all those labels, depending on who you ask and what part of his story you focus on. But the key, I think, is to look beyond the easy answers, beyond the myths that have been built up over centuries, often with very specific agendas. It's about engaging with the complexities, understanding the context of his time, and acknowledging the different perspectives that exist. Ultimately, by separating myth from reality, or at least by trying our best to, we can better appreciate the true impact of this remarkable leader on African history, and indeed on world history. His story isn't just about the past, it's about power, leadership, identity, and how nations are made and remembered. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you think or who else from history you'd like us to unpack. Until next time.